the best panel of the day to talk about eVTOL and AAM. Sorry, Gary and others who spoke before. My name's Darryl. I'm Darryl Abelscroft. I'm currently seconded from the UK's Department for Transport into the UK Civil Aviation Authority, where I am leading some of our work on hydrogen, on eVTOL, and bits of our drone program. I don't usually sound this hoarse. Is there a next slide? I don't know how the slides move along. You got a slide? Oh, the next slide will show my. There we are, my lovely children who've given me some god-awful sickness, which I'm just recovering from. So bear with me. If my voice really goes, then I may have to call somebody on stage, but apologies in advance, panelists. The reason I put my kids on this slide is not because of my sore throat, but because when we're talking about the future, when I think about the world we're going to leave these guys and their generation, climate breakdown, antimicrobial resistance, final season of Game of Thrones, there are some bad things that are on the horizon. But fortunately, there's some really good things as well. And when we're talking about kind of the reality, sometimes, I think Gary mentioned this earlier, eVTOL sometimes moves a bit to the right and can feel a bit disappointing, but actually for these guys, when they turn adulthood, eVTOL AAM will be a reality. So that's why my children are on the slide. I'll turn to my panelists now. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, but also answer an initial question. We've got OEMs, we've got Airspace, and we've got eVTOL users as well on the panel. So it should be a really interesting discussion. So I'm going to start with you, Manuel. So CRISALION, deeply involved in advancing eVTOL technologies. What for you are the kind of key next steps in R&D that will push the sector forward?
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. So my name is Manuel Herrera. Just a quick introduction. I spent the last over 20 years of my career briefly on the automotive industry, later on aerospace, on different projects. And I just added a personal note there. Besides work, I like to build robots, and you see some pictures there with my kids a couple of months ago in a competition we did this. And the other picture you see is a picture of my team, CRISALION. CRISALION is a Spanish company. We are a mobility company. We are developing an eVTOL with exclusive design or architecture based on a patented technology that gives our aircraft unmatched agility and control. This technology we call fly-free. It's the configuration of the propulsion system that was developed with the idea of trying to isolate the cabin of the aircraft from turbulence. And this was the idea here is that if we really want to appeal to a large segment of the population, want to make people want to travel on these air taxis. At the end of the day, we're talking about light aircraft flying low in difficult terrain, close to buildings with current and so on. And I always play the same joke. We need to propose a product that my mother wants to fly in. And if you've had the opportunity of flying on a helicopter or a light aircraft, these things move. You can feel vibrations, the idea was to have a system that would, as much as possible, be very comfortable, provide a very smooth ride. Safety in our industry is an obsession, with good reason. We are obsessed with safety, and thanks to that, we are one of the safest industries in the world. But we need to provide this perception of safety, of comfort. We want to appeal to a large segment of the population. So we are focusing referring back to your question, R&D. We're working on this system. We are also making sure that we provide a viable business case for our customers, for the operators of these aircraft, at every step of the way. We've been listening to this during the whole day. Air taxis or urban air mobility will be a reality. Will probably take a bit longer than some people think. So we want to make sure that we provide aircraft that will solve problems not only in the future when we see these flying cars everywhere, but also closer to the present. And this is why we have an aircraft. We propose an aircraft which has several missions in mind: regional flights, cargo transportation, emergency services, and also urban air mobility. And this means taking into consideration all these requirements from the set point and not as an afterthought. So this has a lot of technical implications. We can discuss them later during the.
Thank you, Manuel. I'm going to turn to Diana now. Please, introduce yourself and welcome your reflections on what you see the next steps for Supernal in terms of regulatory readiness for eVTOL integration, what the key challenges remain before we see kind of achieve an operational AAM ecosystem.
Thank you, Darryl. It's great to be here. We are part of Hyundai Motor Group. So Supernal is an American company. We've been around for 5 years, and we are fully owned by one of the largest automakers in the world, Hyundai. We are, similarly to CRISALION, developing an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, targeting 2028 for commercialization. When we started this company 5 years ago, there were no regulations in place in the United States, our home regulator. And we're pleased to see so much progress has happened over the last few years, most recently with the finalization of the SFAR, the temporary 10-year rule that will kickstart the industry in terms of pilot operations and training requirements. In terms of next steps, we have built our first full-scale technology demonstrator, which we are about to test over in California, where our home base is. We've also been working with the FAA in terms of informing that final rule that I just mentioned. One of the things that we did as a company is not only respond to the rule alongside many of our industry peers, but actually fund an economic impact study to show some of the problematic requirements with the actual proposal, such as dual controls. And we are very pleased to see the FAA come back with a much more reasonable final set of rules there. On a global scale, we've been working with you, Darryl. We've been part of the UK process for some time. Years ago, we participated in the Future of Flight Challenge, and we're part of that demonstration that was mentioned earlier today in Coventry. So we continue to engage with global regulators in key markets, UK and EASA, Singapore, Korea, and a few others globally to influence the rulemaking, to share technology data. As we're starting the testing program, we'll be sharing data with many regulators to make sure that we're ready to validate our certificate and enter as many global markets as possible shortly after 2028 in the United States.
Thanks, Diana. Be good to come back to that international part of this as well. I'm going to turn to David. So Bristow Group. So many assume that eVTOL are kind of natural helicopter replacements going forward. I guess we're interested in Bristow Group's view of how you see the ecosystem evolving and how you see AAM emerging into the market.
Well, thanks. It's a good question, and I guess that's a natural question for a company that's been operating helicopters for 75 years. But real quick, I'm David Stepanek. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Bristow Group. We're a listed company on the New York Stock Exchange, VTOL. So if that's any hint to what we were thinking about doing, it should be. So we did that in 2020. Previously, before I became the Chief Transformation Officer, I was Chief Operating Officer. And I was responsible for our operations. We operate in 19 countries. We have 230 aircraft, mostly helicopters. But we also operate and own and operate a small regional air carrier in Australia called Air North. We use our helicopters today mostly for supporting the energy services around the world. We're in 6 continents today. We've operated in 7. That's the bulk of our business, about 65% of our aircraft. The other 35% supports search and rescue operations. So here in the United Kingdom, we're the Coast Guard. We're the Coast Guard in the Netherlands. We have a really cool operation in the Dutch Caribbean, so if anybody wants to be a pilot, it's a great place to go. And we are also the Coast Guard in the Republic of, or soon to be the Coast Guard in the Republic of Ireland. So it's very exciting stuff. So how does that fit in with eVTOL or advanced air mobility? When the company that's Bristow today was a result of a merger in 2020. And the leadership team, we got together and talked about what we wanted to be when we grew up, so to speak. And that was, our vision was to be a leader in innovative and sustainable flight solutions, vertical flight solutions precisely, but flight solutions in general. And as we saw this emerging space with companies like Supernal and a few others and the capital that's flown into it, we started to see that there's some really interesting commercial applications to it. So I took out of my role as COO and became this transformation officer as basically an office of one, and started thinking about how we could do it, how we could fit into it. I learned quickly that there was really a lot of hype and high expectations that were being put forth in the industry that I thought were going to be very challenging. As a company and in my history, I've launched new aircraft, I've operated aircraft all over the world. I know that the challenges of taking an existing technology and putting it into service, let alone a nascent technology and putting it into service. So that led us to really form how we can do it with our core competencies. And because we believe, yes, helicopters are going to be around for a long time. The energy, especially the way we use helicopters, the energy requirements for those helicopters and the necessary missions they do aren't going to get replaced with battery electric, hybrid electric, or hydrogen anytime soon. We do think it's going to happen. It's just going to be a nice long goodbye, just like carbon is for powering the world. It's going to be a long goodbye, whether it's 2030 or 2050 or 2060. I don't know. I just know it's going to happen, and this industry is going to happen. And we think that with our core technologies, we can help collaborate with OEMs, with infrastructure providers, with governments to make this a reality. And if you, last slide, the previous slide, if you go up there, there's a QR code. So I wrote a book about a philosophical guide to early operations for this industry. If you want to pop on the QR code, you can find it. You can find it on our website. And it really goes through our theses for how to do it. And it was mentioned earlier, I think Mark Green mentioned the investment banker. You know, when the Wright brothers figured out lateral control, we didn't start United Airlines or British Airways the next day. We went through a very pragmatic approach to aviation to get to where we are today as the safest mode of transportation. So let's apply the evolutionary technologies of that to this revolutionary technology. And that's the basis of the thesis and why we want to do it.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Really, really interesting your perspectives on how this will evolve, and keen to get the other panelists' views on that for the rest of the session too. But first, Daniel, airspace for ENAIRE. What do you see in the next steps to prepare Spanish European airspace for eVTOL?
Hello, thank you for having me here. Our approach to accommodate all these vehicles that have been presented, we have to start from the beginning. First of all, ENAIRE, as you can see, I wanted to give a picture of where we are. We depend on the Ministry of Transport. We are the National Air Navigation Service Provider, as my colleague here from NATS. And we together, I wanted also to highlight the other different entities. We have the regulatory part, that is the DGAC, that is at the bottom. And on the right side, it's AESA, the National Safety Agency, that we have a colleague here that he will present also tomorrow a panel. And together, what we did was a national action plan. I think it's something that is quite important, I think, to highlight, that it's very important that in every country, member state has to have some national action plan in order to push and to support all the deployment of different technologies. What you see in the bottom left is the National Action Plan for U.S. Space. It's quite short term, and it finishes in the next year, in 2025. And of course, it will come later, the eVTOL parts and more advanced mobility. So you go to the next slide. I want to present a very important project in Spain, that is SSR project, that is UELCOM, is led by Eurocontrol, and involves 3 different countries for U.S.-based deployment. And as you can see, there are different locations. And the most advanced location is Benidorm, in Benidorm City, in south east of Spain. And we are going to test the 2 different accommodation for manned aviation. The first one, the first graphic you can see, it's in controller space, that in U.S.-based deployment, it cannot be in the same place. The control of, this is important to highlight, and it's also for the eVTOLs, okay, for the first manned eVTOLs that cannot be in the same airspace integrated in, according to US-based regulation, due to the control separation management according to ICAO, and of course that have to evolve and in order to be a full integration, but in this first initial US-based regulation had to be separated and to make a dynamic airspace reconfiguration, as you can see in this graphic. And in the second graphic below is in non-controller space that we have to rely on inconspicuity, that it's quite tricky. From a safety point of view, it's a challenge, but we are also addressing that in this project. Another examples of future projects that we are doing, the ENSURE projects, as you can see here, is how dynamically changing their space in airports or in urban cities, we can put US-based rules or ATC rules in a dynamic way with ATM interface. But this, of course, this is more futuristic. And last but not least, 2 examples that ENAIRE is participating in 2 eVTOL projects. Eureka, that is led by Eurocontrol, and it's related to the vertiport management, and Opera, that is led by Honeywell, and it relates about different corridors and well, operation of eVTOLs.
Thanks, Daniel. And finally, Mark, UK's taken a slightly different approach to airspace. From a NATS perspective, what do you see as the kind of the biggest hurdles of integrating eVTOL alongside traditional aircraft?
Thanks, Darryl, and thanks to Esther and Lorenzo for inviting me to be here and represent NATS, and great to be here with my good friend Danny, holding the air navigation service provider front on all of this. The key thing for us really has been part of that integrated solution. No single entity can solve this on its own, and it kind of talks to what some of the previous speakers were talking about in terms of the overall value chain, whether it be the supply chain or the forward sales and marketing. And certainly what we've seen as our daily business is traffic management in all its forms in the UK skies, and executing that safely, securely and expeditiously. So as new entrants come into that market with amazing technology, amazing new services, it's how we get everyone looking at how we integrate safely and securely, educating, bringing everybody up to the same speed, and getting an airspace that's certainly fit for all uses. Where we slightly differ to the tack that Europe took with the use-based regulations and segregated volumes. We'll start with drones in the segregated volumes first, and crewed aircraft won't come into there unless by exception, and we'll have a process for dealing with that. In the UK, we have an airspace modernisation strategy that was updated in January last year, 2023, that made very clear that we in the UK are going towards integrated airspace, integration of crewed and uncrewed aircraft in the same airspace at the same time. So that presents quite a challenge from an airspace management perspective. What we, as the air navigation service provider, have set out to do, and just to make clear, we're slightly different to a lot of the air navigation service providers around the world, as far as we've been commercialised, a public-private partnership back in 2001, so we're essentially not part of the government in that sense, although we've got the main en route contract for en route air traffic control in the UK, and we also have a commercial arm. So when I talk about NATS, we NATS are looking at what's the right role that we feel we should be providing in helping integrate the airspace as an en route regulated function, and Where it's not that, what's the right way that we can help facilitate this market on the more commercial front, where we're partnering with airports and other customers. So we've got a couple of perspectives that we look through for that. But I'm here today to talk about more on the regulated front. And for us, it's been about what we can provide as well as that collaboration space of getting everyone to a broader consensus is what we're terming it NATS Open Air as a baseline digitalized platform and infrastructure secure by design to help connect all the various forms of new airspace users and existing airspace users together. So we've got a consistent, safe, secure, fair and equitable platform with which we can interconnect everybody, get single points of truth on the critical data so everyone's got the same data, whether it be flight information, aeronautical information, which we largely provide unlicensed, so an actual extension, or indeed traffic information for today of what's flying. If we can provide that through customers such as UTM service providers and so on, then at least the drone operators have that same basis of which they can argue and make clear their safe operation, which can hopefully then help this market flourish. So that's what we see our role being in helping set up that infrastructure of collaboration to create integration.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. And it'd be good to get the OEM's perspective on solutions such as Open Air in terms of supporting that integration. You've heard from all the panelists now. If we can get the Slido link up, it'd be great to start seeing some questions come in. But I've got a few others to kick us off. David, you talked about how you see the AAM ecosystem evolving. I guess we saw it in the news a lot, in the trade press at the moment. Some of the eVTOL companies struggling. Really conscious of what Gary, who's rapidly leaving the room, said a couple of panels ago around. Difficult time for some. Others we're seeing kind of additional investment pouring in. How do the panels see the kind of evolution of eVTOL and AAM over the next 5 years? I'll start with you, Manuel.
Well, I mean, you're referring to a process that was expected that there would be. I mean, someone mentioned the words capitalism, Darwinism. I mean, this is something that was going to happen. At the end of the day, this is a healthy process, and from the perspective of CRISALION, we are a second mover. And we're not ashamed, let's say. So we target in 2030 for the entrance into service, and that brings arguably some disadvantage, but some advantages as well. Rules of the game are a lot more clear today than they were a few years ago. There's a number of decisions in the air, whether it be well, you mentioned before a dual cabin, but there were harmonization between FAA and EASA, harmonization of or let's say charger standard that will emerge. A number of things where we can have the luxury of not committing on a decision yet and then wait and see what happens. And this helps. Having a very lean organization in a moment where it's true that it's a difficult capital market. Of course, if you have a very high burn rate, then things are more difficult than if you're still in an relatively early stage and you're still operating a small boat. So I think this was part of the process. It's part of the process, and I think. Everybody needs to find a way to pass this trough of disillusion, but I think it's good, healthy for the industry as a whole.
Diana, anything you'd add to that? It's different for those who have got big corporate backers?
Look, I mean, I think the fact that the regulations are coming together should give confidence to investors, because regulations was one of the huge risks, right, for our industry, and now that piece has been de-risked. in terms of market consolidation and some shakeups in the industry, it's unfortunate to see, but we've seen it also in the small drone space, in the drone delivery space, in the UTM space, and now with advanced air mobility. Our products are a lot more expensive to bring to market, to certify, and ultimately, the players that have that long runway, will end up winning the race. But it's unfortunate to see, some companies struggling, and we hope to see, some M&A and some activities to save, the intellectual property and a lot of the talent, that are based with those companies. So I think it's part of the natural process. It's the Gardner, typical hype cycle. Yeah.
David, anything since you've written your book?
Yeah.
Anything that's changed in your thinking in that?
Nothing that's changed in my thinking. We anticipated some of this, exits from some companies. We chose quite a few different partners, about seven different AAM partners, and we looked at some of the things that were talked about today. The leadership team, their ability, either the capital that they've raised or their ability to raise capital and continue that process. A pragmatic approach. One of the things I used to hear from a lot of companies is, I got this aircraft on paper, I'm going to have it certified in 2 years. Okay, I was on the S-92 program for Sikorsky. It took us $10 and $1 billion, starting in 1994. So it's just not easy. It's really, really hard. So we chose those teams there, and some are naturally going to fall out, and whether it's evolution or Darwinism. As an aircraft operator, all we don't want to do is win a Darwin Award. We want to get, we want it to be boring. We want it to be pragmatic, and that's what we see happening, and that's we think is going to. We believe we'll be working in a regulatory sandbox next year, flying a full battery electric aircraft starting in July. So we're really excited about this opportunity, and it meets our pragmatic approach to doing this, cargo first, constrained environments. We've heard all these things today, and I think that's important that we continue that process.
And Daniel, Mark, you're developing solutions for these technologies once they come along. How do you kind of anticipate their emergence to make sure you're not designing things that actually aren't needed or designing for the wrong technology?
I think it's a very good question, and we are very active. And with, for instance, with these projects I mentioned, we had many solutions. For instance, in Opera, we are helping to design a corridor for regional air mobility between two airports, changing their space. So we are doing some innovative in their space design. Also, from the system point of view, in urban areas, the idea, for instance, is to interact with the US space, different stakeholders with the cities through a platform that we have for authority users. So in order to connect new stakeholders to the operations, these new stakeholders that will be like local authorities, for instance, in cities, police officers, etc. And of course, in the ATM system, we have in the roadmap for the ATM system the integration of this dynamic airspace reconfiguration with for US space and for other kind of operations. So yes, we are preparing for that.
And Mark, we also got what's the top question? When will NATS Open Air be available? I guess kind of with Open Air in particular, how are you developing a business case for that when you don't quite know at the moment when eVTOL will be ready?
Yeah, it's a great question. What the plan is at the moment, first thing we're doing is firstly respond to a challenge that the CAA or an invitation that the CAA set us back at our last regulatory period settlement to respond by next year to them, June next year, what we believe our regulated role or offering could be, conduct a consultation on that with industry, and propose an economic regulatory model of how it should be funded. What we're doing, by the end of this month, we'll have appointed an initial supplier of a system that we're going to use for a trial, a non-operational trial, to help us validate the services that we've designed. And that'll be complete by about spring next year, in time for writing up this letter to the CAA. We're also conducting that consultation on our proposed economic regulatory model. That's going to come out also this year. And on the slide I showed earlier, I had my little QR code there as well, Getting All Tech. That will link you, if you're interested, to finding out a bit more information about what we're doing in open air. Thereafter, we would look if once we've based all the information we've received, working with the CAA, we would anticipate potential services early in 2026, that sort of time frame, if we get the right support to be delivering those services going forward. So that's sort of the open air angle. But in terms of going back, what else are we doing? And if you look at the eVTOL market as a whole and where it started from, fully autonomous flight, no pilots, landing on rooftops, where it's now moved on from that initial concept operation as recognition. Yes, some people are still going fully autonomous, like Wisk and other companies, but there's a recognition that they're going to be piloted to start with. Okay, they go, well, where can we fly then? Well, you're not really going to change all the airspace structures in a moment, are you? It's going to take a bit of time. Okay, so we're going to fly with some of the rules we have today. So start visual flight rules, flying visually. In something like the UK, obviously the weather's not always conducive to visual flight. But nevertheless, recognising there's these stepping stones, as Dave you had on your slide earlier, about a pragmatic roadmap towards evolution that goes through working with the constraints of today's rules of flight, working collaboratively as an industry to develop those next rules that allow you to move towards something more akin to instrument flight rules or an evolution in this. We have this parallel path that we're working on in drone flight rules or digital flight rules. Something comes together with that to help enable a further use to scalable operations of eVTOL flights. And at the same pace is that market evolution of actually confirming that people want to buy this service. Whether it be for cargo flights, whether it be for transporting people around. So it sets that pragmatic pace. And these are some of the areas that we're involved in, working in collaborative projects, for example, under Gary Cutt's Future Flight Challenge program that Gary mentioned earlier today. In these sorts of projects, working collaboratively with the industry to help come to that consensus view. But equally, there's still some proper challenges out there for all of this working together. We've got the answers. And you say, right, we're going to use this airfield here. They say, right, you're going to need to charge batteries and all that. And you speak to the local energy company and goes, sorry, you're not on our list for upgrading the power supply to your area for the new power that you require, because there's a new enterprise zone, a new village or accommodation they're going to take. So getting all those infrastructure, those basic infrastructure things lined up as well, far in excess of what we're doing from an airspace integration. There's lots of challenges still to go, more broadly speaking.
I wasn't going to go there, Mark, but I will now you've raised that. What do the panel think about the infrastructure needs and the challenges ahead? I guess maybe start with David. It's kind of
what Mark said, we think that the investment case needs to be made first. We really don't know if this technology is going to work. I mean, I believe it, I'm optimistic, but we've got to prove it. So let's prove it within the existing rule structure. Now, we had to do a lot of things with this SFAR and the powered lift and the different, but in the operating environment, it's an airplane or a helicopter, whatever it happens to be. We have rules for that. Let's operate with that. Let's operate within the infrastructure that's already been developed, so we can establish an investment case and thesis to allow it to expand because it's going to be hundreds of billions of dollars or 90 billions of pounds, right? So depending on what currency you happen to be in. So that, I think, it's just back to this approach. Let's get this thesis in place. I know in Miami, I think you're a bit part of that. There's some work that's being doing, built some infrastructure down there, and that's a speculative move. Fortunately, there's some helicopters that have to be supported down there as well. But you're talking $20-25 million to build a vertiport that we see these beautiful renderings of.
Similarly, Diana, can you afford to wait to use existing helicopter rules before you invest in the infrastructure, or do we need to, from a Supernal view, do we need to push ahead?
I mean, I think operations will start where there is existing aviation infrastructure. But in order to get to scale for this to be a true, profitable industry, that's disruptive. We're going to need that connectivity to standalone vertiports that are going to be built in places where you have hotels, stadiums, theme parks, train stations, and other locations. Infrastructure has a really long lead time, as everybody knows, and we don't even have the right zoning codes to actually zone vertiports around the world. So those discussions have to start, near term in order for it to be ready, shortly after entry into service.
Well,
I fully agree. I think both are right. The beginning will use existing infrastructure, but we cannot lose this sense of urgency, because really we have a big challenge in front of us to organize a lot of elements of an ecosystem that will take a long time to mature. And I will put the same example. If you're talking about something we're now all familiar with, electric cars, it was not just about having a nice electric car. You also had to have sufficiently dense infrastructure and chargers, otherwise you're very limited what you can do. This is the same, but there are even more players, because you need the chargers, you need the vertiports, you need the maintenance. We need to change the concept of maintenance network. The existing MRO network will not cut the deal for what we're doing here. I mean, you cannot live with 3 centers in Europe, because this aircraft will not fly to Germany to be maintained. And you need to have something more similar to the infrastructure we have today for cars, with local, perhaps multi-brand workshops, something like this. You need to work on insurance. Insurance is an industry that relies on statistics, and here we will not have that. So how will you calculate? And this is key for an operator as well.
That's right.
So it's important that we recognize that there will be step-by-step approach. Yes, we cannot lose the sense of urgency, because there are many stakeholders involved, and we need to work actively and now. Otherwise, we will have to wait too long.
Thanks, Manuel. And I want to pick up on something Diana said in her intro around the kind of cross-border international piece. In terms of kind of next steps, how important is it we kind of make progress in terms of international harmonization from an OEM perspective, from a user perspective, from an airspace perspective? What do you see those next steps being? Maybe I'll start with you, Dan.
Sure, thank you. This is something that we've been focused on, for years now, knowing how critical it was going to be. We started the company, with the vision to be a global company, and that was our, parent company's vision for us as well. And so we knew early on that it was important to get as much harmonization as possible. Short of that, having good relationships among your regulators, is also very important, and we're very happy to see a lot of that collaboration between FAA, UKCA, EASA, Singapore, and many others. And so, I think part of it is on the regulatory side, and part of it is, on the OEM side to, bring those conversations together, to have, 3-party or 4-party discussions about, where the requirements are in each country, and, what your safety standards are, and how you're thinking about testing, and what are some of the unique testing that you might have to do for certain countries. For example, in a lot of places where OEMs are focusing on today, you might need special testing for handling batteries in severe heat or sandstorm conditions and things like that. A lot of collaboration, needs to happen, and I think this is an area that we're seeing good progress.
Okay, yeah. So we have 14 air operator certificates, so 14 135 certificates in 17 countries. Certified helicopter has been certified for years. We have an aircraft operating in the United Kingdom, aircraft operating in Norway, aircraft operating in the United States, same type, lots of stuff different on it, all because of the regulatory requirements. Lights have to be different colors, there's got to be different enunciations, there's got to be different this, different that, different exit signs. So that it's important we get this right. I mean, your core of the actual aircraft from the OEM is relatively the same, but it's all the bits and kits that starts to add additional capital requirements and different training requirements that are necessary. So it's a challenge. It is the harmonization. I love our regulators, but the bilateral agreement is just that in name only. We've got to get it right if we can. And here's an opportunity. We got a clean sheet. Let's do it. Hopefully it'll happen.
welcome.
Just to complement what my two colleagues said, it's something we have not touched. And I mean, yes, EASA, FAA, CAA, they are in the way towards harmonization. We would like it to be more and faster, but there's one outlier. I think in the West, we're taking a completely different route to what China is doing. And I think this is something that we should all keep in mind. The world's a bit bigger than just the West. China certified an aircraft last year for autonomous operation, which is something we have discarded in the West. We said we postponed the discussion of at least 10 years or something like this. Now, we need to keep in mind that China is going in a different route. I can see two scenarios developing, because certainly at the moment, this is happening a little bit in the. Don't really know how this is developing, but they will get out of China. We will see these machines flying certainly in Africa, in South Asia, in other parts of the world, and things can go very well, and then we're in trouble, or things can go wrong. And then we are in trouble as well, because we will need to explain to the general public, to the investors and everybody else, that certified and certified is not the same thing. So whatever happens, it's relevant for us, and we need to keep it in mind.
Brilliant. 5 more minutes. So I'm going to go through some of your questions. Thanks for sending these in. Diana, Manuel, eVTOL companies typically have a huge cash flow. When do you think they can reach cash break even, and how can they remain financed in the meantime?
I'll start. It's a great question, very topical today. Look, I think it's going to take some time after entry into service for companies to, break even. It's very, very expensive trying to bring a new aircraft type to market and get it through certification. It's even more expensive to build a full-scale production facility and to be able to figure out how to do global logistics and deliver to global customers, where you might have been signing LOIs over the last few years. So there are a lot of challenges, and it's going to take time. Business models are different, so I think the companies that are more vertically integrated and are trying to also do the operations will take longer to become, to break even or become profitable. Being an operator has its own challenges. It's typically, fairly low margin business, and if you don't have a lot of experience in that space, it's incredibly challenging to become profitable. So I think we're going to see differences, based on business models.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at that question. I was thinking how it's kind of a softball for me, because, 1.4 billion in revenue, 200 million in EBITDA, 112 million in free cash flow today. And so our valuation in the market doesn't take into account anything we're going to do with advanced mobility. So for your investment bankers out there, especially your late scale ones, we're a free call for AAM. And what you said about the vertically integrated companies is absolutely correct. I mean, I think about that as just a 5-year receivable, because they're going to invest these billions of dollars in these assets, and they're going to build them. They're going to cost $1 million or $2 million, whatever their cost of construction is, and then you're going to get it back at $120, $125, euros, pounds a seat. It takes a long time to recoup that. I was an OEM for Sikorsky, and before we even put the aircraft on the production line, we wanted 60% of our money in, because of what it costs to do and the lead times for the materials and the construction. So, yeah, it's going to be hard, and cash will be king. So, you guys are in great shape. I mean, to have Hyundai behind you is fantastic. You have a lot of challenges.
I don't.
But I believe in you.
But I mean, huge cash burn, yes, at some point. I think everybody is at a different point in time. Certainly, where the money is coming from, I think the deep pockets are, on one hand, industrials, big corporates. I think one element that is fundamental is government support. And this is, I mean, again, we having debates that the industry has already solved years ago. This is an aircraft, so aircraft are not vertically integrated. for many years. So nothing that has come up in the new technologies is invalidating this. So, yeah. And again, aircraft require government support. This is also, we also learned many years ago, and nothing in the new technologies invalidates that.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm going to finish with just to go along the line quickly. I put up a picture of my kids at the start and talks about that this will be a reality for them, or I think it will. But kind of interested in perhaps going down the line, your take on looking out to mid-2030s, late 2040. What's your vision, Mark, for eVTOL operations in kind of UK?
There's a little bit of, it's not what we even think today, but let's assume it continues the trajectory it's on today. Absolutely, to Dave's model, that coming into where traditional helicopters perhaps can't go because of noise restrictions, local airfields and connectivity in the regions. Not a massive business model, you need the scale of movements really to get it, which points to a more intercity type connectivity. I can see that, but it's going to be existing with a very vibrant, beyond visual line of sight drone operation that's there coexisting in the airspace. Much more digitalisation to support that. But equally, with airspace still available for recreational flying, for those of general aviation, sports, recreation flyers still to operate. I don't think it's going to be all one thing and the whole airspace is going to be regulated, and it's not going to be like that. There'll still be space, but it'll be much more focused on really good, valuable operations and services that people really want.
Good data provided by AAM.
And underpinning it all.
Daniel, Spain, how do you see it in 2040?
Yes, well, very similar. I think in parallel, the evolution of these new kind of vehicles, the interconnection with cities, and how to evolve the traditional air traffic management with all different operations that are more close to cities, and at the same time to leveraging digital services, as Mark mentioned, in the future to evolve from a traditional ATM, more human focus, or traffic controllers in a more digital way. So I think it's two parallel models, two parallel evolutions that have to be together.
Yeah, brilliant. David, would you call it your slow goodbye?
Slow goodbye. So yeah,
where would be in your slow goodbye?
But to base it, I started in the rotorcraft industry 40 years ago. So this was absolutely reinvigorating and exciting for me to get into this space. And my kids are a little older than your kids. I have grandkids about that age. I wanted to be part of everyone's daily life where it's normal. And whether you're using it for getting from point A to point B, or you're using it to bring critical goods or just supplies, whether you're having coffee delivered or a burger or a Guinness or whatever it happens to be, part of your normal life. And it's going to be a variety of different vehicles and a variety of different locations. But Gwen mentioned it, helicopters are super expensive to operate. Super expensive to buy too, but they're really, really expensive to operate. Our analysis shows, and we put into our operating models, that advanced mobility vehicles today are about 60% less expensive to operate than a helicopter. So that starts to bring it down to democratizes. That's what I want it. I want it to be a normal part of everyone's life.
Diana, what do you think?
Fully agree. And I mean, I think for it to become a normal part of everyday life, we need to see a lot of collaboration.
Yeah.
Among, competitors, among the various, ecosystem players, with governments, and on a global scale. And, that's why it's important to take part in discussions like this and to, share perspectives and to, not try to do everything on your own.
Manuel.
I think discussing with a competitor a few weeks ago, we both agreed that it was time to cook the cake. We would discuss how we share the cake some years down the line.
Esther, if you can send us this video in 2040, we'll check. We'll check if it came to. Look, lots of questions that I felt were quite specific. So do come and find the panelists during the dinner and food and drinks after this session. We're going up the stairs now, are we? Brilliant. My voice was held up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the panel.
Thank you.